Hello, I'm the developer of Magic and Machines. I'm going to briefly go through the tutorial book, and I'm just going to skip right through it. So slow down if you want to look at any specific part, and then I'll get into some stuff that you can do with the mod, but not breaking down every single item, just a higher level overview. Alright, so that is the whole tutorial book. Now I'm just going to do a high level overview of what you can do with the mod. So like an elevator, a quarry, a tree farm, a wheat farm, right? And then also, the ME system stuff, explaining that a little bit more in detail, and going over some of um, the spell casting stuff. So at its core, there's kind of three systems, and each one pulls inspiration from a major mod. So in the case of rotation, it's create with the contraptions. In the case of magic, it's Ars Noval, and then there's also Minecraft Redstone. And then for energy, it's mainly applied energistics 2, but then also just like a jetpack and some armor as well. So yeah, I'm not going to break down every single item. That's what the tutorial book is for. I'll have a video in the description that kind of breaks down most of the items in the mod as well. I'm going to go over some of the cooler stuff. So the ME system, you're going to need a controller. You need a drive with a storage cell in it, and then you want a terminal. So to attach things to the controller, you can either place stuff right next to them, like you see here, or you can use a network and mass router. So I have this network and mass router connected to this interface right here, right? So you can see I can put items in here. They can go over their normal stack limit. You'll see I don't have a mod that combines these into over 100 stack limit, but you can still go over it. At the cost of that, we cannot add hover cursor as far as I know. So you'll see that when I click this, it shows up in the top right instead of showing up at my cursor, but you still have full normal functionality. Like you can right click to pick things up, left click to pick things up, shift click. You'll still have full functionality, but just know that that is a display issue that, as far as I know, just cannot be solved without compromises like the item stack thing. So yeah, sorry about that. If Hytale upgrades their UIs, like capabilities, then we'll absolutely update that. So besides that, the ME system has crafting. So this is just all the default recipes. If you add stations, you can unlock more recipes. So if I add this workbench, now I have tier 1 crafts. So you can see I can make an iron pickaxe, right? I obviously need the stuff for it, but I have access to that. But I do not have access to thorium, because that's a tier 2 craft. So to get access to tier 2 crafts, I would place this, upgrade it, and then I can break the bench, and when I break it, this will be the tier 2 version of the workbench, right? So now if I put this in here, that's now the tier 2 version. So now I can make thorium, right? So there's also auto crafting. So I'm going to try to break that down as simple as I can. So let's say I put in my furniture workbench, and I put in some light hide. I want to make a small pile of books. Now you'll see I have no light leather, and I can't make any light leather right now. I don't have any station that has access to the light leather craft. So you'll see I don't have light leather. However, I do have light hide, and obviously I know that light hide can turn into light leather. So if I take a tanning workbench or tanning rack, and then I add that to the stations, and then I go back here, you'll see that now I do have a light leather craft, and it's available to me. If I make one, then obviously it makes a light leather. However, I still don't have enough to make that small pile of books. I only have one of the 2 light leather. However, because I have access to the light leather craft, any vanilla recipe steps, or even modded ones, as long as they do the normal adding the recipe, then you can just auto craft the stuff you need and then craft it, right? So that's how the basic part of auto crafting works. However, there's more to it than that. There's pattern crafting. So you'll see I have an ME interface over here. I'm actually going to add another because this one has its own little purpose that I'll get to later. So I'm going to add an interface, and I'm going to put a network mask router on it, right? And this one is on port 0, so I'm going to make sure they share the same frequency. So both on port 0. Now, I'm going to set this to autocraft mode, and then I'll add a pattern in just a second. So something of note with the stations is by default, we've blacklisted the furnace and the electrical furnace, but you can change this. So if you go into /MNM, the GUI, you can change this menu, and that will control which ones are blacklisted. So by default, it'll be only these two. You can put in modded stations, you can put in anything. Anything that has traditional crafting will be able to work. But for example, the crushing wheel, if I try to put in the crushing wheel, even though it converts blocks into blocks, what could be considered a recipe, it doesn't have an actual recipe. So it's not considered as a crafting station and cannot go in there. So you would need pattern crafting for that. So let's go over pattern crafting. I'm going to do a really simple example. Alright, so as the name suggests, pattern crafting requires patterns. So you want to get your hands on a pattern, and you want to set your input and your output. So in my case, I'm just going to set 1 iron ore equals 1 iron ingot, and that'll be my pattern. Then I'll put my pattern inside of here while it's in the autocraft mode, and now you'll see that the pattern will show up in here. However, it's not magical. Like if I put in 1 iron ore and I start this right now, all it'll do is send it to this. Like it's not going to magically become 1 iron ingot. We need to now set it up so that it does that. So we're going to start off with an item transmitter and item receiver. So I'm going to actually temporarily set this to a different mode, the push mode, so that nothing happens while I'm setting up these item transmitters and receivers. Right. So I'm going to set up the item receiver first. I'm going to set this just on port 6. Then the item transmitter we're going to put on port 5. So now we have this, and there's nothing in the inventory right now, but when we have our transmitter set up from the electrical furnace, it'll come in on port 6, and when we want to send our stuff to the electrical furnace, we'll send it on port 5. So now we're going to place the electrical furnace. So we want to receive on port 5, and we want to transmit on that's the other way around. We want to send, that's right, 5 and 6. So we want to transmit on 6 and receive on 5, because this is sending out on 5 and this is receiving on 6. We're going to also want to add a filter to this, because right now I have this set up so everything in every single slot in the electrical furnace can be pulled out of, because the buffer can store any items, not just iron ore ones. So we're going to set this up so it only shoots out iron ingot, right? So now that that's in the filter, now it'll only send out iron ingot. So if I put this in, it's just going to stay there. It's not going to try to take it out. Likewise, I'm going to also set up a quick filter so that this only sends out iron ingot or iron ore. So you don't necessarily have to do that, but it'll stop certain cases where it'll get stuck in a bit of a loop where it'll get sent to the buffer and then back. You don't necessarily have to account for it, but I'm just going to, because there can be lag and stuff that can cause that. So I'm going to set this to iron ore, and then I'll put that in the filter here. Alright, so now I'm going to just put this in the system. I'm going to set this to auto crafting mode. And so now I'm going to start the autocraft. So, sorry, that world was corrupted in its network. I broke it in a dev update at some point. Even though I was on a release build, it was still broken. So this is just another world. It's the exact same thing. We have the iron ore filter here, same ports. Literally everything is the exact same. And now just running it here, you can see it starts. So it'll go to this, and then to this. Then this will smelt it. And then it will send back to this, and then back to the system, right? So it's all pretty simple stuff, but you basically set up a interface and you put in certain patterns. So like if I wanted to add more to this, like if I wanted gold as well, then it would be the same thing. I would just add more filters to this. well, I would just expand like how many filters are in this, or maybe add multiple or whatever, and then I would just add more patterns here. And so anything that I wanted to do in a furnace, I would do with this interface. I would have another interface for like a crushing wheel, just like you would with applied energistics. All right, so now I'm going to go back to that original world for showing the rotational contraption stuff, because it's not corrupted there. All right, so now going over some of the contraptions. So we're going to start with the quarry. So I'm just going to break this block so the windmill starts. And you'll see this contraption's already all set up. It'll just go down, it'll break the item, and then it'll transfer on, and then it'll transfer on port 0. Right now, I have this item receiver on port 0, which means any blocks that break will get sent into this inventory, which will then get sent into the system. So we can see that dirt that it's picking up is now going in here, right? The stone that it's picking up now is going in here. So whatever it mines is ending up in the system because this interface is on push mode. So I'm just going to reverse this now. So that's just a really simple pulley contraption for quarrying. You could do like a multi-stage with like pistons where you move it afterwards and then you do pulley again. Just keep in mind that only one block mover can act on a contraption at a time. So now a pretty simple tree farm. This is just the simplest I could come up with. I'm sure someone else could make something much better. But here I just have 5 breakers going this way and then 5 going this way so that nothing will get in the way of these placers because they go one up and down in front of it, right? So if anything gets in the middle of these placers, it'll be broken, right? And these placers just have a place filter specific to branches, specifically beech saplings, right? So I then also have this spell parchment over here, and it's just running this tree farm spell, which is just, it's just growing. Like, that's it. It's just growing stuff. This only has 3 grows here. I would actually recommend 4, so you can fully grow the tree every single time. But I'm going to show 3 in practice for like a worst case scenario type of deal. So these placers will place the saplings, not here because we want to kind of finish the contraption here. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So I'm going to go ahead and start this up, and then I'm going to start this as well. And then I'm going to break this. Oh, I forgot to put actual saplings in. Hold up. All right. Let me grab beech saplings. So we're specifically using beech here just because its 3rd stage doesn't break the grass. But obviously we're limiting that with this cobblestone so that it'll never break the grass. But it's the only type of tree, as far as I know, where it'll actually do that like properly. All right, so now let's go back to running this, and then we're gonna turn this on. So now it'll break these trees, and it'll just keep going around and breaking them. Right now I don't have the item receiver set up on the chest to export saplings properly, and I just have this torch for stopping it, whereas in actual practice you want something with like a button and an interactor, and then you'd set a tick specific to the interactor so you could stop this every so often. And then honestly, even better than these breakers would be just using a spell to break this wood. But just for a showcase type of deal, this is what it would look like. It just goes around breaking the trees, and then, planting more trees, and bringing wood in there. And all these items will get picked up, and they're being brought into the system. So you'll see now I have a bunch more stuff in the system right here, right? Because the vacuum is picking it up. Oh, wow, this is all tree infested. I can't find the vacuum, but just take my word for it. The vacuum's picking up the stuff. There's also stuff in this chest contraption that will go when we set this back to normal. But right now, it's not doing that, right? All right, so now like a really simple wheat farm. So a restriction kind of placed by the game when you're using the interact glyph is that you can't really interact in AoE. So if I had like 30 wheat and I wanted to harvest it all at once using the spell book, I kind of just can't. So because of that, this is just a single block thing. So right now I have this running the wheat farm spell, which is just overhead because I want it to resolve above. You could do above, under, doesn't matter. and then AoE cube, just so that it's within the radius. Then we do 4 growths, and then interact. It may well be worth adding a delay to the interact, but in this case, it should be fine. So we just toggle it on, and you'll see it just starts growing and harvesting. Right now, I just have this set up to 10 ticks. If your server can handle faster, you can do faster. You can do down to 1 tick. But yeah, I mean, that's basically it. You could do the same thing with like a singular tree farm, with a lot of things, really. So now let's show the last kind of contraption type of thing. So this is an elevator. Let me break this block on the piston. All right, so now we're just gonna activate this, and you'll see now I'm going upwards. Right. So yeah, I mean, I feel like the contraptions aren't super hard to get a hang of, like making stuff like this, and you can pretty much do anything. Like, I think even if mods add some crazy stuff, I think you'll be able to pretty much do anything between pattern crafting and block breakers and placers and the spell turrets. I just can't imagine that you wouldn't be able to automate pretty much anything in the game. So that's basically it for the contraptions I have to show off. Now I'm going to describe spell crafting just a little bit, but I'm not going to go super in depth. So for the spell crafting stuff, there's 2 relevant tables, the spell crafting table and the spell binding table. So the spell crafting table is just a traditional thing. You can put this in your ME system instead of having to place it, right? You spend stuff and then you get back a craft, right? Some of these, most of them, will refund when you use like a charged drainstone or something of the sort. So it'll refund the base drainstone. So the spell binding table is much cooler. So you want parchments, and then you'll want your grimoire. So I'm just going to set up like a really simple, just projectile water, right? So now if I use this, it spawns water where I click it, right? And I'm going to just evaporate this. So we're going to just put that on a parchment. So I'm going to put 1 parchment in here, and then we're going to put that in there. So now we have that. So I can now put this inside of either a spell turret or a staff. So I'll grab both. So spell turret, if I just place this and then I grab like a button, whenever this gets a blood mana signal, so like button, whatever, it'll do the spell, right? It'll pull from the nearest mana tank, which in my case is this creative mana tank all the way over here, right? So yeah, but it just shoots it, and then, so there are a few purposeful things here. So Raycast purposefully will not work with it, like it'll just go above it, and then Self just won't do anything on it. But besides that, pretty much anything that you need to do can be done on it. Pretty much anything you'd expect from a spell turret. Now, as far as the staff, so there are keybind limitations, so you can't really set keybinds in this game, besides like left click, right click, Q and E, and then a little bit of jump detection and stuff. So to get around that, we're using left clicks and right clicks. So you can do, there's 3 length, so you can do like left, 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 or right, left, right, and then it'll just do that, whatever spell is binded to that. So we're going to go to staff binding and put that in, and then we're going to set this to LLL. So now if I press LLL, it'll shoot. Now the thing is the normal cooldown kind of applies here. So if you click too fast, it just won't work properly. So you have to do it, like, you'll see in the bottom right, if I click too fast, you'll get the little red thing. Yeah, it's really not great, the current state of like keybinds and stuff. But the moment keybinds are added, I'll add like a quick spell type of thing to the grimoire and change up how the staff works a little bit. But for now, that's just how the staff works. You use a chain of left clicks and right clicks to do one of the 8 spells assigned to it. So now the actual like spell crafting itself, like making spells. So there's the create spell tab, and there's a lot of options. Don't be daunted by it. If you want to play around with it, then just grab a creative glyph in creative and then play around with it and try to figure stuff out. But the basics are there's prefixes and then there's prefix modifiers to modify those prefixes. So for example, if I do just projectile and then fire, that will, when it resolves in a block, set the block on fire. When it resolves in an entity, set the entity on fire. However, you see it only resolved in a singular block. So let's say I wanted to expand that a little. What I would do is I would add like AoE sphere. And now when I do fire, that will now resolve in an AoE. So you can see it resolved in a sphere, right? So you just do your prefix that you want, and then you do your prefix modifiers. There's quite a few of them. A really important one is target. You can set specific targets. There's 2 by default, and then you can set up other ones. So you'll see like sapling and tree are ones I used for my spell turret over there for the tree farm. It's pretty simple stuff. Like bouncy makes it bouncy, depth makes it resolve deeper. I can't imagine that any of these would be like misconstrued. There are a few of these that work a little differently with amplify and such. So, like for example, if I were to do projectile and then conjure mage block, normally that would expire like after a few seconds. But if you add an amplify to that, then it won't expire. It'll be a permanent block until, you break it, right? But yeah, all these effects are kind of listed in the tutorial book. So if you ever are confused about a specific glyph, like for example, that conjure mage block glyph, you'll see it says it like right there. And if you have the item itself, it'll also say it. So I would recommend just visiting the tutorial book if you're ever confused about a glyph, but it's kind of just common sense. As far as the main stuff, it's kind of the same type of deal. So if I were to have like a projectile, you can see all of these are main spells, and then you can also add modifiers to them. Delay is a main modifier, but it doesn't actually require a main. So you can just add delays kind of wherever you want. Then the repeat stuff, it's kind of just common sense as well. You can set up a repeat marker, and then if you want to repeat partial, then you'll have to repeat from that repeat marker. If you want to repeat entire, you just use repeat entire. And then whenever you use a suffix, you'll have to use a suffix modifier, like you're forced into doing so. And that'll just be like from player means that it'll restart from the player. So like for example, a sky projectile would restart from the sky, or a projectile would restart from the player. Whereas from resolve point, we'll make it restart from where it resolved instead of having to go through the whole thing again. But yeah, it's not really super complicated. It's not really, I would say, identical to ours, because I tried to simplify it with the prefix main and suffix, but I might change that in the future at some point. But hopefully none of this is too confusing. If you have any questions, you can feel free to ask in the comments. There are a few visual issues that I just want to touch on really briefly. So if you have like copper wire, so let's say I have like a creative battery and I have an electric furnace. The copper wire, if I place these two and I put the copper wire in between it, and then I interact with this copper wire, you'll see that this counts as energy storage, which it's obviously, technically is energy storage, but it's an electric furnace, and it doesn't say that right now. So that's something that'll be fixed soon. Another visual issue is when you have mechanical bearing contraptions, anything that's parallel to the mechanical bearing in facing wise, so you'll see like these mechanical placers are facing downwards. If I were to take these, oh, there's already no saplings in there. So you'll see, I'm just going to start this contraption, and the placers won't quite look right. You'll see the placers do not quite look right in comparison to everything else. You'll see everything else is spinning very smoothly. It's facing the right direction. The placers are not. They are simply locked in orientation. And this is just because this is just an issue with how I deal with it. I do like a bit of Euler stuff, and it just has a problem with parallel phasing things. So whether it's facing the opposite direction or the same direction, it'll be problematic. But that is purely a visual issue. And I'll try to fix that soon, but it'll require a rewrite on how I handle the visuals of the mechanical bearing. So that might take a few days or something. And then there are a few other small things, like for example, things might not necessarily meet on the same, so you'll see like these meet on the same axis and they're kind of overlapping. And there are a few things that won't really meet on the same axis, like you can see here, and things that are just like on a slightly different Y level. So these rods, it's kind of hard to fix the overlapping thing, but the Y level difference thing, where a few of them have a little bit different Y levels, that will be fixed. Those are the really only visual issues that I currently know about. So those will all be fixed soon. If you find any mechanical issues, those are top priority to me. So if you find any mechanical issues, please let me know in the comments. Any more visual issues, it's not the biggest deal to me, but I will get them done in the coming weeks, right? Thank you for watching.